Singapore and India upgrade ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Prime Ministers Lawrence Wong and Narendra Modi also agreed to cooperate and leverage each country's strengths in semiconductor developments. Singapore President Tharman Shanmugaratnam says the country's relations with India are revving up, and both sides will be better for it. In a social media post, Mr. Tharman said he is delighted to meet Mr. Modi again. He added that one of India's key achievements over the past decade has been to uplift hundreds of millions of people. He noted that many had been left out of development for decades. Describing it as a dramatic story of human development, Mr. Tharman highlighted areas in India that made huge progress, including those of health, utilities, and digital financing. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Keat says the next phase of partnership between Singapore and India will require deeper understanding and strengthened trust. He was speaking at an inaugural forum which brought together researchers and business leaders from both sides. Citing protectionist policies seen elsewhere and rising geopolitical tensions, Mr. Heng says these factors make economic growth more complex. To enable both sides to flourish, he adds that some areas of opportunity include leveraging technology and sharing solutions on common problems like climate change. DPM Heng stressed that the younger generation in both nations can also play a key role in deepening and understanding and trust.
In a more contested world, our steady partnership can serve as a beacon to rally like-minded partners to cooperate for growth and development, to harness technology and innovation, and to deepen trust and appreciation for each other's diversity.
And for more analysis, we're now joined by Dr. Karthik Nachiappan. He is Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Dr. Karthik, welcome to the program. For a start, talk to us about the significance of Mr. Modi's visit to Singapore.
Well, the visit is important for three reasons. First, it's Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Singapore since his first term. Now he's made it to Singapore early in his third term, which shows a desire to make progress on a lot of issues, especially trade and investment related. It's also the first visit made by Prime Minister Modi since the transition here in Singapore. So it's an opportunity for both leaders to meet. And the visit comes right after the India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable, where ministers from both sides met and they identified some key areas both countries can work on. So issues like semiconductors, digital economy, education, training, healthcare. Prime Minister Modi's visit, I think, adds political commitment from the Indian side that both sides need to take the relationship forward to the next level, focusing on these issues. And third, finally, Singapore is and has been India's gateway to Southeast Asia. And going forward, Singapore can be the anchor through which India increases its economic presence in Southeast Asia, just as geopolitical tensions intensify all across Asia. So for Singapore and India, there's a need to work on and consolidate this partnership as they move forward, especially when it comes to economic growth.
Yeah, and both sides, they have upgraded bilateral ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. What does this mean for both sides? What is the significance and what do they stand to gain?
Well, I think there's great scope to boost economic cooperation, especially trade. Exports have gone up between both countries since the 2000s, but there's considerable scope to improve that. India is one of the fastest growing economies today with considerable demand for capital, which Singapore has. The Indian middle class is growing and will grow more, and their demand for goods and services will only increase further. India will need to build and modernize its infrastructure just as it builds new roads, highways, airports, and ports. Singapore has great experience in building and managing infrastructure. India is also looking to massively expand its domestic manufacturing sector and produce more goods and services at home. And I think here Singapore's experiences in advanced manufacturing can particularly help. So across areas like healthcare, energy, digital economy, fintech, green tech, I think Singapore has deep experience in capital, which it can share. Just as India industrializes further, And I think India can also help Singapore. India has abundant technological and engineering talent that Singapore needs and requires as it continues to innovate and grow. India is an important energy exporter, and it can ship renewable electricity and other sources like green hydrogen and ammonia that boost Singapore's energy security. And let's not forget that India is a big booming market and will be for the future that can absorb Singapore's future goods and services. So complementarities exist for both countries to do more, and the partnership is a good sign.
And you talked a little bit about trade earlier. DPM Heng Keat mentioned in his speech that annual bilateral trade has grown by 2.5 times between 2005 and 2022 since CECA was signed. How much impact will Mr. Modi's visit have on trade relations in a time of global geopolitical tensions?
Well, there are areas where I think Singapore and India can work together going forward. So, for example, digital technology is an area that's a growth area for both countries. I think they've made important steps to deepen their digital partnership. For example, Singapore and India have linked their digital payment systems through India's UPI and Singapore's Pay Now. I think there's considerable scope to do more. India is a pioneer when it comes to digital public infrastructure that allows citizens to access different kinds of public services online. I think there's considerable scope to deepen cooperation on that between both countries. And I think there are other opportunities like AI, 5G, 6G, quantum computing. So I think both countries would do well and find ways to connect companies working in these areas in both countries so they can find new ways to collaborate and innovate and increase their trade share. And I suspect that formed a big part of the discussions today.
As we've seen earlier, Dr. Karthik, an MOU was signed earlier to cooperate in the field of semiconductors. How does Singapore stand to benefit from this partnership? Because we have decades of experience in the semiconductor industry, which is already developed.
So on semiconductors, Singapore can support India's nascent semiconductor industry, while India can help facilitate the entry of Singaporean companies and the development of supply chains in its huge market. I think today Singapore accounts for around 10% of global chip making output and around 20% of semiconductor manufacturing equipment production. But there are clear limits to how much chip production can take place here in Singapore. But that's not the case in India, where there's lots of land and the operating costs are much lower. So there are a lot of opportunities for Singapore chip companies to produce chips in and for the Indian market. I think over the last year or two, India has been rolling out the red carpet through different kinds of subsidies and incentives to produce semiconductors at home. And that also extends to Singapore now. I think both countries are also trying to protect themselves from a volatile semiconductor supply chain, given geopolitical tensions. So cooperation on this particular issue gives them some security in case Taiwan becomes a flashpoint over the next few years. So this is definitely an area of future growth for both countries.
All right, Dr. Karthik, thank you very much for speaking with us this evening. Dr. Karthik Nachiappan, the Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Thank you.